The snow was falling heavy on the broken land. The battlefield had gone silent. Only the cold wind spoke now. Machines lay in pieces under the white cover, weapons half buried in ice, and the smell of smoke was fading into the night. But not everything was silent. Not everything was dead. She lay half covered in the snow, her skin pale and glowing faint blue under the fading sky. Her hair was tangled with frost, her breathing weak, every exhale a cloud of mist. Her eyes, golden and strange, were half open, staring at the sky as if asking why she was left alive. The alien girl had been abandoned by her own, too injured to walk, too fragile to fight. They had moved on, leaving her to freeze and vanish under the endless storm. The cold bit into her body like knives. Her fingers could not move, her lips were cracked, and the snow kept falling. She whispered a sound in her own language, a prayer or maybe a farewell. She thought of her family far away, her people who might never know where her bones would rest. Her mind was fading, slipping between dreams and death. Then, a sound broke through the storm. Footsteps, heavy, slow, but sure. At first she thought it was an illusion, the echo of death coming for her. But the sound grew louder, closer, until a shadow fell over her. A human figure, tall, covered in armor stained with battle and snow. He stopped beside her, silent, his breath fogging inside his helmet. The soldier looked down at the alien girl, his rifle still in his hand. He had seen many like her, enemies, dangerous beings from the stars. But this one was broken, wounded, helpless in the snow. Her eyes blinked weakly, meeting his golden against human steel. The soldier's heart pounded with conflict. He had orders, his commanders had been clear, no survivors, no mercy. This was war, and mercy had no place here. He should raise his weapon, end her suffering, and move on. But something held his hand still, something in her gaze. It was not the look of an enemy, not the look of a killer. It was the silent plea of someone abandoned, someone left to die. The storm howled louder, wrapping both of them in ice and wind. The soldier crouched closer, studying her face, her wounds, the way she shivered. Her skin glowed faintly, not with power, but with weakness. Her lips moved, trying to speak, and though the words were strange, broken, he heard the tone. It was a whisper asking for help, a whisper begging not to be left alone. The soldier closed his eyes for a moment. Memories came to him of fallen comrades, of the cruelty of war. He remembered once seeing a human left behind, left to die in enemy lands. No one had come for him, and the memory burned still. Was he about to repeat the same cruelty? Was he about to become the same kind of monster he hated? He opened his eyes again, his hand trembling on a rifle. For a moment the world seemed to pause. The snow hung in the air. Only her faint golden eyes kept him grounded. He lowered his weapon, his decision made. The alien girl's eyes widened just a little. She tried to move her hand, weak and frozen. The soldier reached out, lifting her from the snow. Her body was light, fragile, colder than ice. She gasped in pain, but she did not resist. She let herself be carried, her face falling against the armor on his chest. The soldier looked around, the battlefield still silent. He knew this choice could cost him everything. If his commanders discovered, if his brothers in arms found out, he would be seen as a traitor. But leaving her to die here would mean betraying himself, his humanity, his soul. With slow steps, he began to walk, carrying her weight through the storm. Each step was heavy. Each gust of wind tried to push him back. But he held on, gripping her tighter. The snow swallowed their footprints as soon as they were made. The night stretched long and merciless. And yet, in that darkness, in that storm, a spark had been lit. The alien girl, half conscious, felt the warmth of a heartbeat against her cheek. She had thought all humans were monsters. She had been told they had no mercy, no compassion. Yet here, in the arms of one soldier, she felt hope again. A fragile hope, but enough to keep her eyes open a little longer. Enough to let her whisper one word in broken human tongue. Please. And the soldier, though the storm swallowed every sound, understood. He kept walking, not knowing where the path would lead, but knowing one thing with certainty. He had not left her to die. He had chosen to save her, and that choice would change everything. The storm raged through the night, carrying blades of ice across the ruined land. The soldier pushed forward step by step, his boots sinking deep into the snow. The weight of the alien girl in his arms was not heavy, yet every mile made it feel heavier. Her head rested weakly against his chest, her breath shallow, her skin colder than frost. He knew she could not survive long like this, not without shelter, not without warmth. At last, through the curtain of snow, he saw the broken remains of a bunker half buried in the ice. It had once been part of a human outpost, now nothing but cracked concrete and twisted steel. Still, it was better than the open storm, better than leaving her in the freezing wind. He forced open the door, metal screaming under his weight, and stepped inside. The air was stale, but at least the snow could not follow them in. He set her down carefully on the floor, her body trembling as if even the still air was fire against her frozen skin. He removed his gloves and touched her forehead, shocked by how cold she was. Her eyes flickered open, golden light shining dimly in the shadows. For a moment they locked eyes, human and alien, enemies bound by the same fragile thread of survival. She tried to speak again, her lips moving, but the words were broken. They were not human words, not fully, but he could hear fragments. Her voice cracked, filled with pain and desperation. The soldier knelt closer, trying to understand. She was asking for water, he realized, her hand twitching weakly toward her mouth. He pulled a flask from his pack and lifted it gently to her lips. She sipped, her throat moving slowly as she swallowed the cold liquid. Her body shivered harder at first, then eased, as if life had returned for a moment. When she was done, she whispered again, softer this time. Her eyes, still burning with faint gold, did not look like those of a warrior now. They looked like the eyes of someone who wanted to live, someone begging for mercy. The soldier leaned back, heart racing. This was not what he had been trained for. His commanders had spoken of aliens as ruthless enemies, creatures who would never show weakness. But here she was, weak and dying, more fragile than many humans he had seen on the field. He could not fit this image with the orders he had been given, and yet, the choice was already made the moment he lifted her from the snow. The girl shifted, trying to sit up, but her body betrayed her. She collapsed forward, catching his arm, her fingers gripping weakly at his sleeve. Her skin glowed faint blue under his armor's light, and he felt the sharp bones of her hand pressing into his skin. Her voice came again, broken, but clearer now. "Not enemy," she whispered. The soldier froze, every muscle tensed. She had spoken in human tongue, not perfect, but enough to shatter the wall of silence between them. For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the wind clawing at the bunker's walls. The soldier stared into her eyes, searching for deception, for a trap. But all he saw was exhaustion, fear, and something else, trust. The smallest spark of trust, fragile but real. He pulled off his helmet, letting the stale air sting his face. His eyes met hers without the mask of steel. "You should be dead," he muttered under his breath, his voice low, almost to himself. "Yet here you are." The girl tilted her head, not understanding all his words, but she caught the tone. Her lips curved faintly, not a smile, not yet, but a sign that she heard him. Her voice cracked again, alive because you. The soldier felt his chest tighten. He had not expected gratitude, not from her, not from anyone. He was just one soldier lost in a war that seemed endless. And yet, in this broken bunker, in this moment, he felt like his choice mattered. Like saving her meant something more than just disobeying orders. He tore fabric from his own pack and began to wrap her wounds. She winced but did not pull away, her golden eyes never leaving his face. Every motion built something unspoken between them, A bridge across species, across blood, across war itself. Outside, the storm roared as if the world was falling apart. But inside, in the bunker, a fragile peace was born. The soldier leaned back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him. He knew he should not rest. He knew he should plan. He knew the war outside had not ended. But as the alien girl closed her eyes and breathed a little stronger than before, he let himself believe, for the first time in years, that maybe not all enemies had to die. Maybe some could be saved, and maybe that choice could change everything. The bunker gave them one night of safety, but it could not hold back the war forever. By morning, the soldier knew they could not stay. Enemy patrols would sweep this area soon, and the cold concrete walls would become a tomb. He had to move, and she had to come with him, no matter how weak she was. The alien girl opened her eyes when he stirred, her breath still shallow, but stronger than before. Her golden gaze searched him as if asking what would happen next. He offered her water again, helped her drink, then tightened the bandages around her wounds. She winced, but there was no anger in her eyes, only silent endurance. When he gestured that they had to leave, she nodded faintly, though her body trembled at the thought of standing. The soldier lifted her into his arms once more. The weight had not changed, but the miles ahead felt like mountains. Outside, the storm had quieted, leaving a world drowned in white silence. Every step crunched in the snow, echoing far too loudly in the emptiness. He moved carefully, avoiding open paths, taking cover behind ruined machines and frozen hills. Hours passed, the cold gnawed at his bones, but he did not stop. The girl clung weakly to his chest, her head resting against him, her breath warm against the steel of his armor. Sometimes her eyes would close, and he would shake her gently, refusing to let her drift into a sleep she might never wake from. Her voice came now and then, broken whispers and half-human words. "Why help?" she asked once, her golden eyes blinking up at him. He did not answer at first, his jaw tight. Finally he muttered, "Because someone should." She stared, as if trying to understand not the words, but the feeling inside them. The snow grew deeper as they pressed on. Once, he spotted the glowing eyes of a drone sweeping the horizon. His heart froze. He pressed against a frozen wall of stone, holding her close. The drone hummed past, searching, hunting. He dared not breathe until it vanished into the white. The girl's hand gripped his sleeve tightly, her fear raw and silent. He felt her trembling, not just from the cold, but from knowing that death circled so near. When night fell again, he found shelter in the skeleton of an old transport vehicle. Its metal frame was torn, windows shattered, but it offered shadow from the frozen moon. He set her down gently, giving her food from his pack. She tried to chew, but every bite looked painful, her body too weak. Still, she forced herself, as if she knew her survival depended on more than his strength alone. The soldier lit a small flame in the wreck, shielding it from the wind. The light cast strange shapes across the girl's face, highlighting the alien lines of her features. Yet as he watched her, he saw not an enemy, but someone just as lost as him. Her eyes softened in the glow, and for the first time she tried to speak more clearly. "Human name?" she asked slowly, her accent sharp but understandable. He hesitated, then answered quietly. "Ethan." She repeated it clumsily, "Etan," as if the word itself was strange but important. Then she touched her chest weakly, whispering her own name, soft and lyrical. The sound carried like a secret through the wreck. He repeated it, awkward in his tongue, and her lips curved faintly at his effort. For a moment, the war outside felt far away. For a moment, two beings on opposite sides of a galaxy shared warmth in a dying world. But the illusion shattered when the sound of distant engines rolled across the night. Patrols, hunting, moving closer. Ethan extinguished the flame at once, pulling her close, his rifle ready. Her golden eyes widened, fear returning, but she trusted his movements. They stayed silent, hearts pounding, as shadows of machines moved across the snow outside. The wreck shuddered as one vehicle passed dangerously close. If a light had swept inside, they would have been caught. But fate spared them, and the sound faded into the distance. The girl let out a shaky breath, whispering in her broken human words, "Danger always." Ethan nodded grimly, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Yes," he whispered back, his voice low, "always." Sleep never came easy that night. The storm outside had returned, snow rattling against the wreck. The soldier sat awake, guarding, his eyes heavy but unyielding. The alien girl lay beside him, her breathing steady, her fragile frame wrapped in his spare cloak. Once in the night, her hand shifted until it rested lightly against his arm. He did not move it away. Perhaps she needed it, perhaps he did too. When dawn broke, pale and cruel, Ethan rose again. The march would continue. The danger would not fade. But somewhere deep inside, he felt something had changed. She was no longer just a burden he carried. She was a life he had chosen to protect, a voice he had sworn to keep from silence. And though the path ahead was filled with shadows, the bond forged in snow and danger was stronger than the fear pressing down on them both. He adjusted the cloak around her, lifted her once more, and stepped into the storm again. Every step echoed with the weight of his choice. And in the cold silence of a dying world, a fragile hope marched with them. The storm carried on for days, each sunrise hidden behind thick clouds of snow. Ethan walked endlessly, his strength fading, but his resolve unbroken. The alien girl in his arms grew a little stronger with each passing day, though weakness still weighed on her body. Sometimes she whispered words in her own tongue, soft and musical, and though he did not understand, he listened. The sound reminded him that she was alive, that she had not surrendered to death. One evening, he found a small cave carved into the side of a frozen ridge. The entrance was narrow, hidden by drifts of snow, but inside was shelter, dark and still. He laid her down gently on the cold stone floor, then gathered what little fuel he had left. Soon a fire flickered, casting light and warmth into the hollow. The glow danced on her golden eyes as she watched him, curious and uncertain. Ethan passed her dried rations, and though she struggled to chew, she accepted them without protest. When she finished, she tried again with her broken human words, her voice faint but steady. "You fight for army?" she asked, her accent sharp. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes," he replied, though the word carried a weight he no longer felt proud of. Her head tilted, and she whispered, "Army, kill mine." Her hand touched her chest weakly, a gesture of pain, of memory. Ethan had no answer, his throat tight. The fire popped, filling the silence with sparks. Later, she sat up with effort, her hand trembling as she reached toward the flame. Her skin glowed faintly, her fingers catching the firelight in a way that made it shimmer brighter. Ethan watched, unsure if it was a trick of his tired eyes or something more. The girl looked at him and whispered, energy, pointing at the light. Her glow faded again, her body too weak to show more. But Ethan understood. Her kind carried a power humans did not. And yet, here she was, drained, relying on him for survival. That night, the bond between them grew stronger. She listened when he spoke, even if she did not know all his words. And he listened when she murmured, catching fragments of meaning in her tone. They shared silence as much as speech. And in that silence, the space between human and alien grew smaller. But safety never lasted long. In the dead of night, Ethan heard footsteps crunching outside the cave, slow and searching. He froze, rifle ready, his heart pounding against his ribs. The girl's golden eyes widened, fear sparking in their glow. He motioned for silence, pressing a finger to his lips. The shadows at the cave mouth shifted. Light from a scanning drone flickered against the snow. Voices in harsh tones carried through the wind, soldiers hunting. The girl trembled, her hand clutching Ethan's arm. The sound of her breath was sharp in the silence. The footsteps grew closer. Ethan pressed her down gently, covering her with his cloak, hiding the faint glow of her skin. He raised his rifle, finger on the trigger, ready to fight if they were discovered. But fate held its breath. The patrol lingered, scanning the ridge, their lights sweeping dangerously close to the cave's edge. The girl buried her face against Ethan's chest, muffling her trembling breath. Every second stretched into eternity. At last, the voices drifted away, the lights fading into the storm. Ethan let out a slow breath, lowering his weapon, his muscles aching from the tension. When the danger passed, the girl looked at him with wide, tear-bright eyes. "Safe, because you," she whispered. Ethan shook his head, whispering back, "Safe because we're together." The words came without thought, but they were true. She held his gaze for a long time, then gave the smallest nod. A fragile understanding had formed, one that even war could not erase. For the first time since the battlefield, Ethan saw hope in her expression. Not the hope of survival alone, but the hope of trust. She leaned against him, her body weak, but her spirit stronger than before. And as the fire burned low, Ethan realized something that made his chest tighten. This was no longer just about saving a life. It was about something larger, something that defied orders, defied war. It was about a bond born in snow and silence, a bond that neither of them could deny. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cave, two enemies sat close by the fire, no longer enemies at all. And though danger circled them still, the bond of survival grew brighter than the flames. The cave gave them only one night of peace. By dawn, Ethan knew the patrols were closing in. The storm had hidden them for a time, but machines never tired, and soldiers never gave up their hunt. He could feel it in the silence. The net was drawing tighter. The alien girl stirred weakly, her golden eyes opening as he packed their few supplies. She tried to rise on her own this time, struggling against the weight of her wounds. Ethan reached to help, but she shook her head faintly. "I'll walk," she whispered in broken words. Her legs trembled, her body fragile, but her determination burned brighter than before. He let her try, standing close, ready to catch her. Each step was small, painful, yet she forced herself forward. Her voice carried a single word, strong, as if speaking it made her believe it. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen hardened soldiers give up with less pain, but she would not surrender, not now, not after coming this far. They moved slowly through the snow, following the broken ridges that cut across the battlefield. The silence was deceptive, broken only by the crunch of their steps. Then, without warning, the hum of drones filled the air, sharp and mechanical. Ethan froze, pushing her against the shadow of a ruined wall. Dark shapes moved above, lights sweeping across the white ground like knives of fire. The girl clutched his arm, her golden eyes wide with fear. He raised his rifle, but he knew the truth. Against machines, he was only one man. The drones circled, scanning, their red beams cutting closer. And then one light stopped, fixed directly on them. Ethan cursed under his breath, pulling her back as the drone shrieked, its alarm echoing across the snow. Gunfire erupted, red bolts tearing into the wall around them, stone and ice exploding. He pushed her down, returning fire with sharp, precise shots. One drone fell, spiraling into the snow, but more moved in, relentless. The girl covered her head, trembling, her voice breaking. No. Ethan fired again, but the sky lit with answering fire. This was not a fight he could win. Then something strange happened. The girl raised her trembling hands, her skin glowing faint blue. The air around them shimmered. The snowflakes caught in a sudden, invisible current. A surge of light burst outward, striking one drone midair, sending it crashing into the ice. Ethan turned, stunned, as her golden eyes burned brighter than ever. She gasped in pain, her body shaking, the glow fading quickly. But the effect was real. She had bought them a chance. Ethan grabbed her, lifting her again despite her protests. He ran through the snow, weaving between shattered vehicles and broken walls. The drones screamed overhead, but their aim faltered in the storm. Bolts of fire lit the night, chasing them as they fled. At last, he spotted another ruin ahead, the wreck of an old bunker, its door half buried in ice. He forced it open and stumbled inside, collapsing against the wall with her still in his arms. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the pounding of his heart. He set her down, her body limp, her glow fading to nothing. She opened her eyes weakly, whispering a single word, "Help you?" Ethan shook his head, gripping her hand, his voice harsh with emotion. "You just saved us both," he muttered. Her lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smile before her eyes closed again. Ethan sat in the dark, rifle still in his hand, but his thoughts were not on the war. He replayed the sight of her power, the way the light had burst from her hands. She was not just another refugee of battle. She was something rare, something dangerous. And now, because of him, she was still alive. The enemy would not stop searching. Not now. Not after they saw what she could do. Outside, the storm howled again, but inside the bunker, Ethan felt a heavier weight pressing down. The war was no longer just about orders, no longer about soldiers against aliens. It was about choices, about survival, about protecting someone who had become more than a burden. She had become his responsibility, his ally, his fragile spark of hope in a world consumed by ice and fire. And as he sat in the dark, her faint breathing steady beside him, Ethan knew one thing with certainty. The net was closing, the enemy would come harder, faster, stronger, but he would not give her up, not now, not ever. The bunker was silent, but Ethan's thoughts were not. The glow of the alien girl still haunted his eyes. The memory of her light striking down the drone burned into his mind. She was no ordinary survivor. She carried power that his commanders would never ignore. If they discovered what she was, they would demand she be turned over, studied, maybe destroyed. And yet, as she slept weakly beside him, Ethan knew he would never allow that. His radio crackled suddenly, shattering the stillness. He froze, pulling it from his belt. A familiar voice cut through the static. His commander, sharp and cold. "Unit 7, report your status," the voice ordered. Ethan hesitated, his thumb hovering over the switch. He had not called in since the battle, not since he chose to save her. Now, his silence had caught their attention. He pressed the button at last, his voice low, steady. "Alive?" he answered, holding position. Static filled the air for a moment before the voice returned. "Confirm your location, return immediately, and leave all enemy wounded behind." The words struck like a blade. Leave her behind. That was the order, that was the command, that was the law of war. Ethan looked down at her, the faint rise and fall of her chest, the golden glow hidden behind her closed eyes. She had trusted him, clung to him in the snow, fought for him when drones had attacked. Now his own people demanded he abandon her. He shut his eyes, anger boiling inside. He remembered every soldier he had seen left behind, every body frozen in enemy lands because someone said it was necessary. He remembered the pain of watching cruelty repeat itself over and over. And he knew, if he obeyed this order, he would become the same monster he despised. The radio hissed again, the voice growing harsher. "Unit 7, respond. Leave the alien and return to base. That is a direct order." Ethan's grip tightened, the metal almost bending under his fist. He looked at her once more, fragile and broken, yet alive because of him. She whispered faintly in her sleep, words he barely caught, "Safe with you." The decision was no longer a question. It was already written in his heart. He raised the radio to his lips, his voice firm. "Negative," he said, each word sharp as steel. Static filled the air, then shouting, "Repeat that, soldier." Ethan's eyes hardened, his jaw set. "I will not leave her," he declared. "She is under my protection." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hiss of the storm outside. Then the voice returned, colder than ice. "Disobeying orders is treason. Unit 7, You know the penalty? Ethan did not flinch. He switched the radio off and dropped it onto the floor. The crack of silence that followed felt like freedom. The girl stirred, opening her eyes slowly. Her gaze met his, confusion and worry flickering across her face. "You angry?" she whispered. Ethan shook his head, kneeling closer. "No," he said softly. "I made a choice." She tilted her head, trying to understand. "What choice?" she asked, her voice weak. Ethan's eyes burned with quiet fire. "To stay," he said, "to protect you, no matter what it costs." Her golden eyes widened, shimmering with something unspoken. For a moment, silence filled the bunker, broken only by the storm's cry. Then, slowly, she reached out, her fragile hand brushing against his. The touch was light, trembling, but it carried more meaning than any words. She understood. She knew he had risked everything for her. Outside, the world shifted. The enemy would come, and now his own people might hunt him too. He had no safe path, no command, no orders left to follow. Only his choice, only the bond forged in snow and blood. And though the weight of war pressed heavier than ever, Ethan felt lighter. He was no longer bound by chains of command. He was bound only by his humanity, by the vow he had made. He glanced at the girl once more, her golden eyes watching him with fragile hope. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, perhaps impossible. But he knew this much with certainty. He would not abandon her. Not now, not ever. The storm had thinned by dawn, the horizon stretching pale and endless under the frozen sky. Ethan carried the weight of his decision like steel on his shoulders, yet for the first time, he did not regret it. The alien girl walked a few steps beside him, her frame still fragile, but her will unshaken. Every time she stumbled, he caught her arm, steadying her, and each time she whispered, "Strong," as though promising herself she would not fall again. They moved carefully, guided by broken landmarks of war, burned-out tanks, shattered towers, the silent bones of battles past. Ethan's eyes never rested, searching the horizon for movement. He knew both enemies and his own brothers in arms would be hunting now. He had turned his back on orders, and the world had no forgiveness for traitors. By midday, the distant shape of a human outpost rose against the snow. Its towers reached into the gray sky, its lights a faint shimmer of safety and danger both. Ethan stopped, his breath heavy, his chest burning with doubt. If he brought her there, they would not welcome her. They would take her, question her, maybe kill her. Yet if he did not, she would die in the wild, and he could not carry her forever. The girl sensed his hesitation, her golden eyes lifting to meet his. She touched her chest weakly and whispered, "Safe with you." The words cut deeper than the storm ever could. He knelt in the snow, lowering himself to her level. "No matter what happens in there," he said softly, "I will stand with you." She tilted her head, not understanding every word, but hearing the truth in his voice. Her trembling hand brushed his, and she whispered, "Together." They moved closer, each step echoing with tension. Soldiers on the walls spotted them first, alarms echoing through the air. Guns turned, aimed, red lights cutting through the falling snow. Ethan raised one hand high, keeping his weapon slung across his back. "I'm human," he shouted, his voice carrying across the cold. "I'm bringing in a survivor." The gates groaned open, but the sight that met them was not welcoming. Rows of armed soldiers stood ready, their eyes cold, their rifles steady. At their head, a captain stepped forward, his face pale with fury. "Ethan," he barked, "what have you done?" Ethan stood tall, though the weight of every weapon pointed at him threatened to crush him. "I saved her," he answered simply, his voice unshaken. Gasps rippled through the soldiers, some lowering their weapons in disbelief, others raising them higher. The captain's voice thundered, "You disobeyed direct orders. You brought an enemy into our walls. You have betrayed your oath." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving the captain's. "I followed something greater than orders," he said firmly. I followed what is right. Beside him, the alien girl swayed, her golden eyes glowing faintly as she looked at the soldiers. She raised her weak hands, not in threat, but in peace. "No, enemy," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. The words struck the silence like fire through ice. Some soldiers shifted uneasily, their grips faltering on their rifles. For the first time, they saw her not as a monster, but as a dying girl who could barely stand. Her eyes shimmered with tears, her voice breaking, "He saved me." The captain's face twisted with rage, torn between duty and doubt. He raised his hand to give the order to end it all. But before the command left his lips, Ethan stepped forward, placing himself fully between the girl and the firing line. "If you want to kill her," he growled, "you'll have to go through me." The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. The storm outside the walls had quieted, but the storm inside the outpost raged stronger than ever. Dozens of eyes watched, soldiers caught between the man they respected and the orders they had been taught to obey. And in that moment, something shifted. One soldier lowered his weapon, then another, then another. The line of rifles wavered, the certainty of war cracking under the weight of one man's choice. The captain's hand trembled, his authority slipping like sand through his fingers. At last, with a curse, he lowered his arm, his voice bitter. "Take them inside," he ordered, "but this isn't over." Ethan exhaled slowly, relief flooding his chest, though he knew the fight had only just begun. He turned to the girl, her body weak, her steps faltering, but her eyes still bright with fragile hope. She whispered one word as they crossed the gates, "Home." Ethan looked at her, and though he knew this was not truly her home, though he knew battles still waited, wars still raged, and choices would grow harder, for this moment, for this fragile spark of peace, he let himself believe her, because in saving her, he had found something he thought long lost. Not victory, not obedience, but humanity. And in the snow, among enemies and allies alike, one soldier and one alien girl had planted the seed of change,